Hello and welcome to the Cider Party channel. We've been deleted, well, deleted isn't the word, terminated was the word from YouTube. So we're now on BitChute only. So if you're watching this, you're one of the few. Why they get rid of me, well, that's another story. I've got Barry on the line here and we're going to have a chat to him. Barry's the expert on the New World Order. And I want to sort of find out, what is the New World Order? Barry, what's the New World Order?
Well, first of all, Ian, I should say I'm not an expert on anything. There are lots of people investigating the New World Order. They're all at various stages of learning. It's not something that can be explained in 5 or 10 minutes. I've been looking into this for about 10 years now. And I've spent a lot of time listening to other researchers and experts, long-term researchers like Alan Watt.
Yeah.
He spent the best part of his life looking into this group and the shenanigans that they're up to and how they're deceiving us all. So it's a learning curve, and really, you never really get to the end of it. Even the top people that have been researching this for 20 and 30 years still haven't got to the bottom of it. But we all have a picture, and I think the picture is good enough to know that they're up to no good, these people. And I should say, Ian, it's we all want a picture of what it actually is. And it's not possible to give a full picture in a short space of time. Just let me explain, Ian. You know, when you was a child and you got those jigsaw puzzles, and they come with a picture on the box. So before you'd put the pieces together, you knew what the picture looked like.
Yeah. And you put all the blue ones and all the green ones and all the sky and all the town,
Yeah.
and if you got people, you'd put those all together. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had the picture to guide you. Right? Now, this New World Order, this is a jigsaw puzzle, but there's no picture on the box. And that's the reason it's so difficult for people to actually see what it is. Yeah. And the only way to see what it is to start collecting pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. And there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. And it's only when you've collected enough pieces that a picture starts to emerge, if that makes sense, Ian.
Yeah, you got... I was a DJ for years, and I run a mobile disco unit, and I was finding that I was in the 80s, I was beginning to find that songs never depicted gender.
That's correct.
And we'd gone from the Beatles in the 60s, with girls' names, and She Loves You, and all the rest of it, into nondescript songs.
That's correct.
And I thought that was odd. And nobody was doing She Loves You songs.
That's right.
And as a DJ, I thought, they're non-Pacific. And you had things like Boy George doing songs, and you thought, hang on a minute, this isn't, I'm not going to say it's wrong, but it ain't right. Things were missing, and it was done deliberately, is my interpretation of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because as Jordan Maxwell, I don't know if you've come across Jordan Maxwell.
No.
Jordan always says at the beginning of his talks that nothing in this world happens by accident. Nothing. Everything that happens is planned for a reason. And I noticed that change with the songs myself. In fact, I was a professional drummer for about 45 years. Played in all types of bands, pop bands. I grew up with the Beatles. I was involved with the Spice Girls. So I've played at a fairly high level. And I've noticed some of the shenanigans going on from the inside. So I didn't pursue that. I didn't really want to get into the full professional business. So I continued learning my trade in engineering. I didn't like the people that I was meeting. I was meeting some nasty people. I didn't like them. So that was a big red flag to me, and I stayed at a sort of an amateur level, just working at weekends.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. That they eliminated girls' names and boys' names from the songs. They're all unisex. They don't speak much about love anymore, and it's all connected with the attack on the family. You know. Because that is one part of the New World Order.
So it's all combined together then? It's not just something that's happened by chance or by evolution?
Oh no, it's not happened chance. It's all perfectly planned, because these people have control at the very, very top. They have control of the music industry. They have control of everything: the media, the publishing, the books. It's just, but I mean, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit here, Ian. I think we need to go back a long way to the start of this group, and the earliest I can trace it back to, and this really has come out of John Coleman's work. I don't know if you know John Coleman, but that's a name worth writing down.
No, it's a name I've heard of, but
yeah, John has spent years and years researching the New World Order. He took it back to the British East India Company. Another researcher, his name's, and you should write this down, it's Carroll Quigley. He was the official historian for the Council on Foreign Relations. He spent years and years writing his book. I think it's about 1,200 pages. It's called Tragedy and Hope: A History of the World in Our Time. Now, I've tried to get through this book, but I can't get through it because it's dry reading, if you know what I mean, Ian. It's absolute. So basically, I have the book as sort of a reference, if you know what I mean. I dip into it occasionally to get points.
Yeah.
It's just too dry to read from the. I mean, maybe some people could do this, you know, from the front to the back, but I can't do it. So it's just a reference book for me.
Yeah. No. Well, if you look back in history, you've got Rhodes, who went to South Africa.
Yeah.
For the gold mines and tried to control it for the so-called British Empire, but we've now found out it's for himself, and he was involved with the Scottish Freemasonry. You've already named the East Indian Company. Yeah. And it was a company. It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't Britain.
It was a massive company.
Yeah.
It covered half of the world's trade. It even had its own army. So yeah, I mean, all these names are all linked together. I mean, Cecil Rhodes, he believed that the British way of life was the best in the world, and it was his dream to extend it over the complete globe.
Yeah, but it wasn't the British way of life. Our way of life, I believe, is good, but he wanted to do it for his own ends.
Well, I'm sure. He would have had his own motives, you know, yeah. But I mean, there was Cecil Rhodes. There was the other people coming into it. The Milner group, Alfred Milner. He's another one. So these names that I'm mentioning, really, Ian, these are the early days. Out of this group come John Coleman called it the Committee of 300, which emerged out of the British East India Company.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the Committee of 300 and one person rules them. That's the theory.
Yeah. And so, right at the beginning, these people had an idea to dominate the world. Carroll Quigley called it the Invisible Empire.
Yeah.
But strangely, Quigley wasn't against the idea. His objection was to the secrecy involved. He thought that the people and the plan should be made public. So it's a bit odd that he spent so much time exposing this group when he actually agreed with what they were doing, you know. But you know, times moved on, and the people involved died, and other people took up the baton. The names changed, and the plan also evolved up to the present day.
Have you read the book that was written in the 1790s by John Robison called The Proof of a Conspiracy?
I've probably got it somewhere.
It deals with the start of the Illuminati.
Yeah, Adam Weishaupt, I think his name was. Yeah, the Bavarian Illuminati. They apparently infiltrated the Freemasons, so now the Freemasons are part of it.
Yeah, the guy is working for the king or Parliament. John Robison. He is a Freemason, English. He goes to Germany at the German-French border, chats with the Freemasons over there, and finds out that there was 2 Scottish Freemasons, went over to Germany, persuaded them that they had the inner secrets of Freemasonry, and it was all built on a lie. They had an old book that was burnt, and there was a couple of fragments of paper, but he never says what was on it. So he said they had a couple of fragments of paper, and then they made the rest up. So these 2 Scottish Freemasons explained about the hierarchy of Freemasonry above the 3 degrees of Freemasonry. That's where we get the 33-degree Masonry from. And it was all built on a lie. That is allegedly where the Illuminati came from. So what happens there, I'm not sure what happens after that. And I'm not sure how it fits in with the New World Order, if it's not all the same. If it's all just different clubs within the same club.
Well, there are various factions that have come together. I mean, at the beginning, the Rothschilds were not involved, but they come in at a later stage to help with the financing. So, I mean, these are the Rothschilds. They were originally Khazars. I think they come from Georgia originally. So there's a question mark over the Rothschilds if whether they are actually Semitic Jews or not, you know, and some people say they're not Semitic Jews, and they simply converted because they were being threatened at the time in Georgia. So I mean, today they call them the Khazarian Mafia.
Yeah,
so
well, my view on that is that a lot of the names that they say is the leaders of the New World Order are maybe Jewish, but it's not because they are Jews.
No.
Because I got certain people telling me it's the Club of Rome. I got other people telling me, oh, it's Scottish Freemasonry.
Well, the Club of Rome is another part of it. And I was going to mention that, you know, if we come up to the present time, Ian, you know, there are now several groups that are involved, and they're all global think tanks. They're all the different groups are working towards the same goal. So you mentioned the Club of Rome. That was a think tank. I think it was set up by David Rockefeller and Brzezinski. You know, all the big players. So now we've got the Club of Rome. You'll have heard of the Bilderberg Group.
Yeah, that was another name I was going to mention.
Yeah, you'll have heard the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yes.
You'll have heard of Chatham House.
Yes.
Which is the Royal Institute for International Affairs.
Yes.
That's the sister organisation to the CFR.
Yeah.
And the Trilateral Commission. I don't know if you've come across that name.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't quite know what it is.
Well, that was set up by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and these David Rockefeller, and this is where the plan changes. This is, you know, because as I said, it was everything was in flux. I mean, this group had an idea to you know, for an elite bunch of people to dominate the rule. But as time has moved on, the plan has changed and evolved. And David Rockefeller, he come to like the idea of a technocracy.
Yeah.
The technocracy movement sprung up. I think it was in the 1930s during the financial depression. I think it was 20, I'm not sure of the exact year, I think it was 29, 30, 31, when there was a massive global financial meltdown.
Yeah.
And the reason that these technocrats gained popularity, they actually blamed the incompetence of national governments for allowing this to happen. This was their basic argument, that they basically weren't fit to do the job, and their argument was that what is needed is governments of experts.
Yeah. Well, you look at some of our politicians today. You know, if they came to you and you were interviewing them for a job, you know, there's very few of them that I would take on.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And they are falling into the trap because the more incompetent that government becomes, and the more the system collapses, the more likely it is that the technocrats will win the arguments and will be forced into a system that Brzezinski has wanted all along. Ruled by experts, engineers, physicists, scientists, whoever. These people will make all the decisions, and you know there are two sides to the argument. You know, on one hand, you can say, well, that sounds like a good thing. It's better to have experts ruling.
But it's like the way you're portraying this, it sounds like the EU.
Yes.
The EU is run by allegedly commissioners, but
yes.
The commissioners are being advised by businesses and technocrats.
That's right.
The Parliament doesn't make the law. The commissioners make the law on the recommendations of the technocrats.
That's right. But I can tell you the problem. You know, I mean, I think people have to be careful here, because what will happen? All the benefits of a technocracy will be explained to the public at some point in the future. You know, it will be pointed out that national governments, the average MP is just not fit for purpose, and they will point out, you know, all the benefits of a technocracy. They won't mention the downsides, and the downsides are this: that the system is going to be set up based on the unit cost of energy. And we've seen part of it now with Agenda 21 on sustainability.
Yeah.
It's now been upgraded to Agenda 30 now. So it's the key word is sustainable. What is sustainable? What isn't? Who decides? Well, the simple answer is they decide what's sustainable. Do you want 3 children? Sorry, that's not sustainable. You're not allowed. Does your family want 2 cars? Sorry, that's not sustainable. You're pumping too much CO2 into the atmosphere. Yeah. Not allowed. So these people are basically going to decide everything: what size house you can live in, what temperature you can have in your house. You'll have a smart meter feeding information back to the energy companies. If the temperature goes above what they regard as sustainable, you'll get a phone call. Mr. Summerhill, you're at 25 degrees. It's not sustainable. Can you turn your temperature down, please? And if you don't turn your temperature down, they'll shut you off.
So it looks like all these things are already put in place. You've got gender labelling in schools, or not labelling, whichever the case may be. And that's now been put under bullying and harassment.
Yeah.
It's happening here and in America.
Yeah.
You've got the dumbing down of schools here and in America. Because I don't think a 16-year-old leaving school now had the education I had.
Well, can I just stop you there, Ian? Here's another name for you. Here's another name for you about the dumbing down of America. Charlotte
Isby.
Yeah. So
brilliant book.
Yeah. So she's wrote up on that one. So yeah.
The dumbing down of America is a book worth reading.
And it also applies to the UK, because I mean, we basically joined at the hip, you know.
Yeah.
It's the Anglo-American establishment, really, and it applies not just, it's all the developed countries. It's North America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We're all basically going down the same path.
On the education side, it's in Britain, in America, it's called Common Core. Here, it's called outcome-based education.
Ah, right.
And when I was looking into it, just briefly, it ends up with the Tavistock Institute.
There's another one. There's another name.
And it goes right the way back to the 20s and 30s again. And then you find out that the Tavistock Institute theories and sociology was taken up by the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, the Tavistock, they are the world leaders in mind control. This is. I mean, we're basically living in a constructed reality that's been perpetuated through all the media. I think the media now is controlled by 6 major companies. So no matter which paper you pick up, you know, whether it's the Mail, the Independent, the Express, the Telegraph, the Guardian, whether you switch on your TV, it's the BBC, the ITV, or you pick a book up from the library. But all these forms of information are all controlled by 6 major companies. Yeah. So you absolutely have to step out of this sort of arena and get your information from elsewhere. It's not easy because many parts of the alternative media have also been infiltrated. And I mean, for example, years ago I started listening to Alex Jones because of his take on 9/11. Now something's happened to Alex Jones. I don't know if you listen to him much.
Yeah, I was an avid listener of Avid Jones. I put my laptop on in the kitchen and have my breakfast in the morning and have a cup of tea, and I used to put Alex Jones on 8 o'clock in the morning on YouTube and listen to part of his shows. But I found after a year he was beginning to repeat himself, and he kept saying the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't really what I needed. Yes, it got us interested. Yes, if you want to say, you know, I won't admit to taking the red pill because I've always been sceptical. I've always been a realist. So I didn't need to take the red pill. I've always known that things have been wrong and people are trying to organise things behind the scenes. I was a parish councillor for 8 years, and I saw how things worked there, and things were done behind the scenes. You'd get into a committee meeting in the council, and you'd find they'd already decided what they were going to do between themselves. And you'd say, hang on a minute, you can't do this. And then Maggie came into power. That was on my 4th year. And you then had a fight between Labour and the Conservatives, and they were using the parish council as a debating society. And that's not what we were there for. We had a certain amount of money that the people gave us, and we had that money to spend on local things. Scouts, Cubs, Guys, youth clubs, the playing fields, the allotments, and certain things we had to do. But they started talking about world peace and Biafra and all sorts of things going on in the world. Oh, the council disagrees with this and the council disagrees with that. And I was thinking, that's nothing to do with us. Why are we talking about that?
Yeah, so that was your sort of awakening. Mine happened in a different way in 2004. So we're talking about 14 years ago. And mine happened due to a divorce. Now, most people that get divorced, they sort of come to some arrangements over the children and, when dad's going to see the kids. But about 10% of divorces, the wives actively obstruct the father. So these cases end up in the family courts because the father then has to apply for contact.
Yeah.
So I ended up in the family courts. I had a solicitor, I had a barrister. I was paying a lot of money. This was my case. But it didn't feel like my case because everybody else was making decisions for me. And I could tell I was being pushed down a certain path. I mean, what happens if the mother, typically, the mother has to come up with an allegation. I mean, if she wants to stop the father seeing the children, she has to give a reason for it. So they come up with an allegation.
Yeah, but you're a drunk or you're violent or
whatever, yeah.
No.
Or you're abusing the children, something. Now, what I found was, the system of justice we had, we are supposed to have, is that you're guilty, that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. That doesn't happen in the family courts.
Yeah, well, they're now secret, aren't they?
Well, they've always been secret.
Oh, I didn't realise that. I thought it was only recently that they.
No, they've always been secret. You're not allowed to talk about it to the press, to anything. And if an allegation is made against you by the mother, the father has to prove his innocence.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to prove that you're guilty. All she I couldn't understand this because at the time it happened, I didn't understand the difference between the criminal courts and the family courts. The family courts are administrative,
Yeah.
you see, and there's actually no penalty for telling a porky. In a criminal court, you can be
Yeah. Subjudice. Yeah.
perjury. That's not so in the family courts. The wife can tell as many lies as she wants. If she's discovered that she's been telling lies, and many have been discovered, she's not paid. The worst that could happen to her is that she loses custody and the children are handed to the father. But as is often the case, the father's not in a position to actually look after the children, especially if he's got employment.
Yeah.
So the mother just gets a slap on the wrist basically, and the judge always says, well, there's no point in imposing a fine, because if we impose a fine, the children will suffer. So they get off scot-free.
Yeah.
And that's that. So, and then the other thing that happens, typically, fathers, there's a whole industry that's built up around the family courts. You've got psychologists, there's psychotherapists, social workers are involved. You've got counsellors who specialise in so-called anger management. I don't know if you've come across that one, anger management specialists.
Yeah, we've come across them before now.
Yeah. So if the father's angry, if you show any sign of anger in the which by the way is perfectly normal, because if someone's stealing your children, right, you're going to be pretty angry, aren't you?
Yeah.
But if you show signs of that, the judge will refer you to an anger management counsellor. And if you don't go, if you don't attend, well, you're definitely not going to get to see your kids. So you've got to go. and if you don't make the right noises when you're there, because of course, this, and it's usually a woman, she writes the report out that goes back to the court. And if the report isn't in your favour, you don't get to see your kids.
Yeah.
So while you're going through these anger management sessions, you have to basically nod at everything that she's saying. That was my sort of aware. I knew that there was something absolutely rotten about these courts, and I couldn't make sense of it. But it did make sense when I stumbled across a number of key websites that started, and it wasn't sort of an instant light bulb moment. It was more of a gradual awakening. I come across the Nordic Committee for Human Rights, set up by a lawyer, Ruby Harold Clearson.
Yeah.
She got involved because of the social services snatching the children in Sweden. And I went from there. I come across a website in. I'm going to say a website. It's more like an encyclopedia. It's called Fathers for Life. It was set up by Walter Schneider. He's a German, but he ended up in Canada.
So it's not just happening here in Britain then, it's throughout Europe, and they talk about the same sort of thing in America as well.
Yes, it's all the developed nations. It's all the developed nations because we're all interconnected. The judiciary is connected. The social services speak to each other. The courts speak to each other. It's North America, It's Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and there's a few other countries involved. But it's basically, you know, the countries that were set up on common law. I don't know much about common law.
Yeah.
I've not studied greatly, but it's
Yeah. No, I'm not an expert on common law, but I got a couple of friends who think they are, and they keep saying to me, "Oh, common law this, common law that," and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. We've gone back to John Locke and we've gone back to Blackstone's, and something that we're looking at is William Murray, and we think that in the 1700s, William Murray was a Jacobite, or his family were Jacobites. He was the chancellor, or a lawyer. What do they call it? Duchy of Lancaster, who was in charge of the courts, and he was rewriting Blackstone's to edit Blackstone's, and we found out that Blackstone's had been edited from the first edition and then further editions on, and they've twisting the law. So if Blackstone's was our common law, then what they've done is rewritten the law as it's gone through. And I found it out by accident. I wasn't looking for it. I was talking to a friend of mine who is into Locke and the common law and old Acts of Parliament, and I was trying to find out if hunting was ever involved in common law. And I went into Bristol Law Library, which is Bristol University, and I had two versions of Blackstone's. They said, "Which one do you want?" And I said, "Oh, can I have both of them, please?" So I had volume 1 and volume 3, I think it was. And over that time, in the first one, it said that hunting the ravenous beasts of prey was for the common good, and that was fox and badger. But today, when I use the argument, I don't mention badgers, because it's not very PC. But in the second edition, it had changed to hunting the ravenous beasts of prey with horse and hound. So they changed the meaning of it. And then I told my friend this, and then he went and looked, and he found all sorts of stuff changed all over the place, and he reckons that's how they changed the meaning of the old common law into modern text, and it's still happening today.
yes. Well, this was a path that I started to go down. It was a rabbit hole that was getting deeper and deeper, and I thought to myself, well, you know, how long is this going to take, and is it a distraction from what I want to know? And I eventually come to the conclusion that if I continue to study this subject, I was not going to get to see the big picture. And it's the big picture that I want to see.
Yeah, and it takes you down all sorts of rabbit holes.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But you see, the problem we've got now with the law, whether it's, you know, statutes or Acts of Parliament or common law, Magna Carta, all this. You see, they've all been usurped for the simple reason that once a government introduces the concept of terrorism, that allows them to introduce emergency measures.
Yeah.
And those emergency measures override every law written.
Yeah.
It allows them to basically do anything they want to do.
Well, it's like the two girls that came over. Can't remember what their names were. There was two girls that came over to interview Tommy Robinson when he was going to give a speech at Speaker's Corner. And the two girls, one from America and one from Europe, they were stopped at the airport, detained under Terrorist Act for
That's
2
right.
days, and then released.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone can be a terrorist. Anyone can be a terrorist. They can stop anybody from doing anything simply by, you know, accusing or that they're suspects.
Yeah.
And so now we've got indefinite detention. Habeas corpus has been suspended.
Yeah.
In America, they had a thing called posse comitatus.
Yes.
The troops wouldn't be deployed on the streets. That's gone. The president now has the right in law to assassinate anyone suspected of terrorism.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah, he's done it. I can't remember the guy's name. No, if I try to say it, it'll come out wrong. There has been some examples, yeah. Anyone suspected of terrorism now, the president can order his assassination now, without trial, anything. There are still people in Guantanamo Bay that they've not been charged with anything. It's a black hole.
Yeah.
Once you go in there, you know, you're damn lucky if you get out. So the rule of law has been, and they knew that. They knew that from the get-go. When 9/11 happened, right, they knew that was the curtain raiser.
Yeah. And it wasn't done by who we're told did it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that is, I mean, this is the greatest magic show on earth. Everyone has been, well, not everyone, but I was certainly fooled in the beginning. You know, I think I was in the dentist waiting to have a filling done in the waiting room, and it come on the TV, you know. And I was absolutely stunned.
Yeah, people were in shock for about 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And they just fed us the narrative, and everybody took it in.
Well, they did. And again, I mean, I'm a bit ashamed of myself, really, because I mean, I've worked in engineering as well all my life. I should have known better. You know, steel frame buildings don't collapse like that. No. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I've got a good understanding of construction steel. I work with it all the time. I know the melting points. I know what it takes to form it, to cut it. It's low carbon stuff. I mean, if their story had been true, that it was actually the heat, what we would have seen visually would have been a slow, gradual deformation of the girders. I mean, the girders can actually.
And it would have burnt all the way down.
Well,
it would have had to have been a whole fireball, the whole of the building, and it wasn't. It was only at the top, and then it fell.
I mean, for the doubters, for the people that don't believe it, I point them to the fire at the Mandarin Hotel in Beijing, China. It was a similar type of building. You can see this on YouTube. It was a brand new building. I think it was ready for occupation. There was nobody in it, and the fire started from I think there was a nearby fireworks display, and it got burning, and the flames were coming out of every window from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
Every single window. It was a huge fire, terrific temperature.
Well, it's like Grenfell Tower, isn't it? That didn't come down.
Yeah, that's right. That didn't come down either. Although I'm not sure of the construction of that. But
yeah, I don't know.
No, but I know that the Mandarin Hotel is a steel frame building. The morning after, and you can see photos, the morning after it was completely gutted. and the steel frame was still standing.
Yeah.
That's what the steel frame is for. It's the reason they built from steel.
Yeah.
So they don't collapse in a fire. So you know, when I started looking into 9/11, I thought, oh my God, and that's when all the pieces started coming together. You know, they blame the Muslims, and then I realised, I mean, you know, this story that this guy in a cave with a mobile phone orchestrated one of the you know, the greatest technological feats on the planet. It's absolutely farcical when I think about it, you know. And I was damn well ashamed of myself for even falling for this story in the first place.
How do you think the towers came down?
Well, different methods. The two twin towers. But you know about Building 7, don't you, Ian?
Yes.
Yeah.
The one that went down after the BBC reported that it had gone down. It was just in the background of the reporter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Building 7 was a classic controlled demolition.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the way it sort of it looks like it's disappearing into the ground.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? But if you look at the top, just as the just before the collapse starts, if you look at the top, just above the executive suite, you can see an explosion at the top that causes the sides to move inwards.
Yeah.
And that's to contain the debris.
Yeah.
Now NIST, finally, NIST that's the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They finally admitted that Building 7 fell at free fall speed for 2.5 seconds. Yeah. The only way that can happen is if all the core columns have been severed simultaneously at the bottom. It isn't possible, because, you know, free fall speed, you've got to have zero resistance underneath.
With the twin towers.
Well, they're different, yeah.
They said there's two theories. One, that it was a nuclear device. There's another one that says it was a energy beam.
That's Judy Woods. That's Judy Woods.
Yeah, and then there's another one that says that they was thermite. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, the thermite one is Richard Gage. This is the one by Architects and Engineers. Now, unfortunately, both sides now are accusing each other of being the controlled opposition.
Yeah, isn't that just the way?
Just the way, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Or are they both controlled? And one of them could be telling the truth, but we don't know.
Well, I tend to go with Richard Gage, because you know, I've been involved in steelwork myself, and I've, you know, that was my initial education at college in engineering, you know, tensile testing, and so I tend to be with Richard Gage on this one, and the other reason, we've seen photographs inside the Twin Towers of the detonators that were used. There were a bunch of art students in there who'd been given space in the building to continue with their artwork, which was a cover to give them access to the building, and photographs of the detonators in boxes. You can see them. It's all there. People say, well, how could they possibly you know, have access to all this? But they were engaged in other people were coming in doing maintenance on the lifts.
Yeah, the guy that was the janitor has written a book, and he was on the BBC Radio 5 Live a couple of years afterwards, and he was telling the story that the maintenance guys were bringing in loads of stuff, but he never knew what it was.
That's
And
right.
he
Yeah.
believed that it was the explosive to bring the building down.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
But nobody's heard of him since.
No, well, there's a lot of people have disappeared. You know, you tend to if you're very effective at getting the message out, you tend to disappear.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I try not to be too good.
No, you don't want to get too good at it.
No.
What we need Ian, is lots of little people talking to each other.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, if you become a leader, you've basically got a target, which is I think Richard Gage is very brave. You know, I think he's a brave man. He's
Well,
got
like
a target.
Tony Robinson.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you listen to Tony Robinson, and you can't disagree with him. He's telling the truth.
Yeah,
In his way, but he's telling the truth.
yeah. So, I mean, I try not to get into arguments with Judy Wood's directed energy beam. You know,
Yeah.
she's quite plausible and she's got a lot of followers, etc. And I always say to these people, you know, when I talk to them on the forums, you know, we don't need to prove exactly how it was done. We know that the official story is impossible, absolutely impossible. That's all we need to know, and therefore that warrants another investigation. The problem is getting an investigation, an official one, independence. That's what we need to push for.
Yeah.
Now, basically, you know, it's got to the stage now where the establishment know that we know it's a fairy story, and they don't care.
Yeah.
Because they've managed to indoctrinate enough of the masses, and we're talking about millions of little people that still believe the fairy story, and to them that's all that matters. They don't care that there may be a few thousand of us that
Well, this also goes into the manipulation of the press as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's just. I mean, again, the press are falling back on. Have you heard of a guy called Edward Bernays?
No.
Well, that's another name you should keep in mind, Ian. Write down. Edward Bernays was the master of propaganda. There was another guy. I think his name's Walter Lippmann or somebody. But these guys wrote the book on propaganda, how to manipulate the public mind. Now he's dead now, died years ago. But the techniques that are used have been refined and honed, and they're still being used today.
Well, they're using it in advertising.
Yeah, they're using it. It's the techniques of Edward Bernays. But it's not just in advertising. The media are using it now.
Yeah.
Television's using it now. It's all about manipulation. It was Ed Bernays. You might have heard the story. How he was employed by the tobacco companies to encourage women to start smoking, because at the time it was a bit frowned upon. You know, very few women were smoking. So there was an important event coming up in I think it was in America, some special event. He knew that the journalists were going to be there with the cameras and everything, you know, and he arranged for a group of debutantes to be on the scene, and he told them that when he gave the signal, he wanted them to get the cigarettes out and light up, and you know, as the photographers started clicking the cameras, this group of debutantes got the cigarettes out.
Well, look at the amount of films you had with them smoking cigarettes.
That's right, yeah. Because there was like 50% of the population that wasn't smoking.
Yeah.
So it's all about, you know, I mean, and because people are, you know, human beings, we're sort of herd following creatures. We do tend to follow the herd. If we see a lot of people doing something, there is a natural tendency for us to think, well, you know, that must be the right thing to do. If everyone else is doing it, well, you know, and they use that against us. They make us believe that everyone is doing this, that, or the other, you know, and we all fall into line.
Well, I've always believed that everybody should be an individual and have their own frame of mind and do what they enjoy and do what they like, within reasons, of course. But it's like you say, everybody's got to be PC and everybody's got to follow the herd.
Yeah. Well, just coming back to the New World Order and this, and it is a technocracy that they've got planned. Oh, by the way, if you want to know the details of the technocracy, I mean, this is the system. The guy who is the expert on this is named Patrick Wood.
That's a name I don't know. Patrick Wood. Yeah.
Patrick. Okay. Yeah. If you look up, you can either buy the book. It's called Technocracy Rising. He's given a number of talks you can listen to on YouTube. Patrick Woods. He's been following the Trilateral Commission. David Rockefeller, Brzezinski. He's been following people for years. So he's the guy. If you want to know what the technocracy is, Patrick Woods is the guy to listen to. So for the elites who have this plan, they basically have three obstacles to bring this about. There are three main obstacles. One is religion. They want to get rid of all religions because religion, people of faith, this doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit in with a technocracy.
Yeah.
Intact families.
Yeah.
With a mother and father bringing up their own children. It doesn't fit in with a technocracy because they don't want parents raising their own children. They want the children to be handed to a child expert. Parents are not, in their view, parents are not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
They're okay for breeding. They're okay for.
That's what they're trying to do in the States.
Yeah, that's right. So you can see all these child experts coming in, you know, and it'll get to the point where they'll say, well, no, you can have a child. You can have maybe one or two, but you can't bring them up yourself because you don't know enough, and you've got to hand them over to a child. So, yeah, it's religion, the family, and people. The other obstacle is people who feel some allegiance to the country that they were born in.
And then you can add to that, schooling and the music that we started with, at the beginning.
Yeah, the schooling. There's hardly any men left in teaching now. So we've basically got a feminised education system. At primary school level, there's hardly any male teachers. They've all been driven out by, and they're not going in because it's fear of accusations by the children. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, you touched me. The children know that they can get back at a teacher by making an accusation. So the guys now have figured, well, you know, why should I spend years and years at university studying to be a teacher when my career can be wrecked in a
Well,
second.
a friend of mine studied history at university. He did a year's teacher training course, and now he's working in an insurance company.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know what happened, but he didn't get on in teaching at all. Um, when he was at university, and his college degree was being done on British history, it stopped at 1860. And he said, well, what about the Glorious Revolution of 1866, which gave us our modern parliament, which solved all the problems that we had under Cromwell? And they said, oh, you don't need to do that. That isn't part of the curriculum.
yeah. Well, it's all been corrupted, Ian.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me now. You just reminded me of something I remember Alan Watts said. Um, Alan Watts, his mother was a historian. Alan was brought up in Scotland. His mother was a historian.
Wasn't he in a band of some kind?
Yeah, he was
In the
in a
music?
yeah, he was in a rock band. Yeah. So that's been his interest. His main interest was history and music. But see what happened. His mother got him interested in history at a very early age, and so he knew a great deal about it, and he ended up arguing with his history teacher.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I don't know whether he left or he was expelled for causing problems in school. Because he could see that what he was being told was just not the version that
Yeah.
he'd been given. And in those days in Scotland, there were still lots of good books in the old libraries. Some of the
I'll
original.
tell you a little story. When I was at school, if the teacher was going wrong, or the message was wrong on the boards, or whatever she was doing, if it was wrong, I would point it out. Now, I met an old teacher after I left school when I was a counsellor for 8 years. One of the counsellors was one of my old teachers. Anyway, we went down the pub after a council meeting. We were just having a pint before we went home. And he said, we used to dread you being in the class. Because if something was wrong, you would find it. He said, you were a very clever lad. I said, oh, thank you very much. He said, yeah, the teachers used to dread you being in the class. Because if they did anything wrong, you would find it. I said, oh, well, never knew that.
Well, if the teachers had been telling the truth, they'd have nothing to worry about.
Yeah. And that's when
Um,
I, find out they were manipulating the stories then.
yeah,
Oh.
but I just want to come. I'm going to have to wrap this up shortly, Ian.
Yeah, and me, I got to go and do some more work.
I just want to come forward to the present time and the problem now that the elites have got with us, because they see the 7.5 billion people on the planet, and they're wondering what to do with us. You see, for thousands of years, they've needed us to mine the earth, get the minerals out of the earth, the coal, all the resources,
And make it into things.
and make it into things, to work in their factories, and to farm the land. So we've been indispensable to them. Now we're on the cusp of artificial intelligence. It's coming rapidly. Now, I don't know if you've seen the robots that are being developed by Boston Dynamics. It's worth, if you haven't seen them, it's worth taking a look in, because this is another part of the picture. It's a big piece of the picture. Boston Dynamics are on contract to DARPA. DARPA is the research department of the US military.
Yeah.
So they've had to contract out to, Boston Dynamics. So you can go to their website, and you can see that they're and you can look at the work that they're doing. There are two humanoid type robots. One's called Petman. The other one, it's a bit more advanced. It's called Atlas.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it before, it's quite astounding what they can do, you know. There's some mechanism in these robots that prevents them from falling over, that keeps the balance.
Yeah.
So they can actually navigate over a pile of rocks that you couldn't. If you had to climb over a pile of rock, you'd be on all fours.
Yeah.
These things can navigate a pile of rocks without falling over. If they sense that they're going too far one way, the leg comes out instantly and corrects itself. It's quite amazing, these things. Now this research is ongoing. There are two things that's holding it back at the moment. One is the power pack. It's the moment they've got them tied to an umbilical cord, so all the mains power is going to it.
Yeah.
They can go out independently for a few minutes, you know, maybe 15 minutes or so, but the power pack doesn't last long enough. So that's one of the obstacles. They're still working on that. And the other one is the programming. So I mean, there's basically an army of programmers.
Yeah.
Heading towards the time when computing power is good enough.
What, they'll write their own programs?
Well, eventually, that's self-learning. They're working on self-learning robots now. There's one. You can find one. It's just an arm. It's just an arm on a pivot.
Yeah.
And it's picking up a soft piece of cake or something.
Yeah.
And the fingers come round it, and it crushes the cake. And it learns that it's put too much pressure on, so it comes again, and the next time the piece of cake slips out of its fingers.
So it knows it's got to put a little bit more pressure on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it finds the correct pressure to pick it up. So this is like self-learning. This is going on. Now, the other one is, have you heard of Moore's law?
No.
Moore's law is computing power doubles every 2 years. So because of Moore's law, which as far as I know, it's not broken down yet. It's still good. I think Ray Kurzweil has estimated that we will reach the point of singularity in 2045 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Which is the point when the processor is as powerful as the human brain.
Yeah.
So this will be true.
So do we think computers will take over, or do we think the New World Order will allow the computers to control it for them?
Yes, they want the computers to control basically all the robots. The robots will serve the elite instead of us.
Yeah.
Because there will be no tasks that they can't do. We're seeing it now with driverless cars, driverless trains, the drones, the army. The army are using robots.
Yeah, and drones and everything. Yeah.
The Japanese that are trying to decontaminate Fukushima, they're using robots. So they're under constant development. So, you know, what we need to think about is, okay, they're pretty good now, but they're still fairly primitive. They're not about to take over right now. But what we have to consider is that with this constant research that is never ending, how good will they be in 20 or 30 years' time? And you know, it's quite clear that, you know, in 20, 30 years' time, there will be nothing that these machines can't do.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
Barry, I think we're going to have to wind up. I think this has been absolutely fascinating. You're telling me things I haven't heard of. And the names that you've given out, I expect people are now writing them down and looking them up on the internet already. And I'll edit this out so it's tidied up a little bit. But I don't think I'm going to have to do a lot of editing. I think I'll just top and tail it. But Barry, you are a mine of information. And I've learned so much over the last hour.
Well, thanks very much, Ian. It's been enjoyable having a conversation with someone that's openly minded enough to take it all in. It's a difficult subject, and it's not a pleasant subject to listen to. So thanks for that, Ian, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, Barry, thank you very much indeed, and all the best.